Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Slingshot from levees.org. I am so excited about the show we have today. We're going to be talking about a lot of different conversations, all having to do with the advocate and the levee failures and how those are related. You all know me, Sandy Rosenthal, and also joining me today is Mr. Rudy Vorkapic. Most of you are familiar with him, but just to refresh your memories just a little bit, Mr. Rudy Vorkapic, originally from Chicago, came to New Orleans the year prior to Katrina. He founded and produced the satirical newspaper, The Levee, with its motto, "We hold nothing back." And also, The Levee was the first newspaper to call out the Army Corps of Engineers for being responsible for the levee failures. Also joining us today is Miss Sandy Parker. Sandy Parker is a New Orleans filmmaker and a real estate agent who was inspired to move back to the area from Chicago after Hurricane Katrina. She's been a marching member of Crew de Vue for over a decade, and she recently renovated a home in Broadmoor where she lived with her ragamuffin cat, which is a ragdoll Persian mix named Hazel. I don't know if I've told you, Sandy, but that's my favorite cat in the whole world, Persians and ragdolls. So you
Oh
put
yeah.
it together, and I got to meet your cat, okay? Promise?
Oh, I can arrange that, definitely.
Okay, well,
By the way, I have to correct you. I did not move back from Chicago. I moved back from Portland, Oregon.
I don't know why I said Chicago. Did I say Chicago?
Yeah,
Looking
but
right at the word
I
Oregon.
was I was born in South Bend, Indiana, so I that was near
Well, Oregon
Chicago.
spelled backwards is Chicago.
Thank goodness for editing. I was looking right at the word Portland. That's just incredible. So, well, thank you for pointing that out. And we all need to have where we came from. And by the way, I'm from Massachusetts, so we're
No
all
way.
country. And here we all are in New Orleans, and I know I will never leave. How about you all?
No, I
Uh,
have no
I
plans.
No plan.
I want to move to Italy. I've been wanting to move to Italy for the longest time, and in a few years I'll do it. I'm still learning Italian.
Yeah, no, I'm resilient, which is a word I hate actually. I just like saying that to say that the word I actually like using for us down here is stubborn. I
Yeah,
forget about
hard-headed.
resilient. Resilient is that anybody can be resilient. We just don't want to go. We're stuck here. We're planted. We're stubborn.
I think you're right. It's a fancy word for
Yeah,
stubborn,
stubborn. Cheers. Let's boil it down to the truth.
not going anywhere. Oh, but Sandy, when you move to Italy, I want to come visit you there too.
Oh yes,
I
I fully expect a lot of guests.
I
I
think
need
Cheers.
to like buy a hotel, just everyone can come and stay.
oh, that sounds great, like something out of the White Lotus.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sounds
or
so
the
nice.
New Marigold Hotel or whatever that movie was.
The
Yeah,
most
why not?
important word you'll ever use in Italian, I think, is the word prego or prego,
Oh,
which
uh-huh.
multi-use. It can be pretty much anything. It could be thank you, you're welcome,
Thank you,
yes,
please. Yeah.
I agree. It's a very, very useful word.
Oh, I thought maybe
We've got one of
Mangia
the
or Toiletta
yeah.
would be better, but
Yeah, we've got one of those in Chicago, but it's a kind of a profane word, and you can use it almost as a profanity, as a greeting, as a
uh-huh.
salutation. It's fun, but let's go on.
Oh, you're not going to tell us what it is?
It's you want to hear it? It's the word jagoff. It's not anything else, but it makes no sense, and it's a Chicago favorite. And if you know a Chicagoan and he says that to you, it either means he loves you or he's going to take you out.
Okay, well, that's a now all-purpose
There
word.
you go.
Okay, well, we have a lot to talk about today. So much as much fun as this is, we probably should move along. And we're going
Cheers.
to start today's episode talking about something that I really thought I would never see, and that is where an editor at what used to be called the New Orleans Times-Picayune and now the Advocate actually was rude and disparaging toward a subscriber who was also a flood survivor. And her name is Ms. Kathy Hightower. And all she was doing is pointing out an error in a recent local advocate story that uh, mentioned the flooding during Katrina and used the phrase, Katrina devastated New Orleans. And Ms. Hightower took issue with that and wrote to the editor and said, no, it wasn't the flooding of Katrina, it was engineering failure. And in response to that, the op-ed editor actually put in writing, okay? I never thought I'd see the day. Put it in writing and responded to Ms. Hightower. I'm paraphrasing for today, but we can back all of this up. That yes, our news bureau does know what happened, and what we're using is Katrina shorthand. And she didn't stop there. She went on to say that, oh, when we give a weather report, we don't explain why the sky is blue. So I don't know how you can be more condescending than to speak to not only a subscriber, but a flood survivor. This particular flood survivor's father died in the flooding of a heart attack. So there you have it.
Wow.
And the response of levees.org was to create a rally starter petition and invite all of our many, many thousands of supporters to send a letter to the top editor of The Advocate, asking him to issue a memo to all their reporters and have them to stop using Katrina shorthand. So with that introduction, would anyone like to jump in? How about you, Rudy? First.
Well, yeah, something like that. Look, this guy, this new editor, Rene Sanchez, he's been there about 3 years, and he follows up a guy who took us through Katrina and was, I don't even think it's arguable to say that he was the best editor at the Times-Picayune, Peter Kovacs, a pure newsman if there ever was a newsman, and we have to remember something about the Times-Picayune and a lot of newspapers, but the Times-Picayune in general, specifically, it was only a good newspaper. It's got a long history in this town, but it was only a good newspaper for a span of about 20 years. When the Newhouses owned it, the family before John George, when they owned it, they really invested in quality journalism. They decided to make this paper pretty much a flagship newspaper because the newspapers that they owned, they bought newspapers that were the single newspaper in the towns that they bought them in. So there was no competition for the major newspapers in the towns that they bought newspapers in. And the same thing for New Orleans at the time. But they really did invest in news. So when Katrina happened, they had a slew of excellent reporters and really some fine quality editors who did a great job and who took us through Katrina. Now, even after Katrina, like you mentioned, Sandy, I decided to write a satirical newspaper because I was angry at everything that was going on. I got angry at how the federal government was responding, how the local government was responding, at all of it. So I took on, my goal was to throw the insanity back at those who were throwing it at us. So meeting you, listening to you as a citizen journalist and taking you seriously, I came to the conclusion very quickly that it was the Army Corps of Engineers that had done this. And you showed the evidence. You showed the investigative tenacity that no one else had shown, and came to the unmistakable conclusion that it was the Army Corps of Engineers and it was their poor design and absolute poor upkeep of the entire system and the neglect of it. And not only the neglect, but the inability to finish it. It had been started back at Betsy. After Hurricane Betsy in 1965, they started developing this system. It was funded. And as time went on, they never fully funded it. They kept taking funding away from the levee system. So when Katrina happened, it had been almost 40 years and there had been no system put together, even though it was supposed to be. So when Katrina happened, the Times-Picayune had a stable of veteran reporters who were ready to really get the job done. And they did great reporting from Chris Rose, who was there, in my opinion, should have won the Pulitzer Prize that year. He finished second, but he was our psyche for a year. He was the conscience of the city, and And they did a lot of great reporting, a lot of great understanding of who was to blame and what the federal government was trying to accomplish and not accomplish, and how they were trying to bully their way in and take over and do all the wrong things, and how the state and the road home and all these programs that had great intentions, but Katrina overwhelmed so many things that there was so much to write about. Well, what I fear right now, and what this letter you're talking about puts fear in me, is that we're regressing at the Times-Picayune, that we're going back to the days before it was a true news outlet. Renee Sanchez, this editor, he wrote a letter to the readers when he was hired in 2022, and he wrote another one to them a year later. And one of the things he said in his letter in 2023, this is a year after he was hired, was that he was trying to make a commitment to the readers. And he said, and this is a quote, "We want to be the most trusted, in-depth news source on all the subjects people care about." Well, what subject do we care more about than flood protection, than insurance, than these things that are all tied together inextricably? And for anyone at that newspaper to give the Army Corps or the government and to go back and try and almost rewrite history is what they're trying to do. They're trying to do it. The paper of record is seemingly trying to rewrite history. Well, that just absolutely scares me and makes me think that we're going back to a time before the Times-Picayune was interested in news.
And I am enraged that we're in this position having to have this conversation today. I'm really angry. So would this be an okay time for Rudy, for me to step in and follow up with what you're saying?
Please.
Okay. So, and I'd like to bring in Sandy Parker to comment on this next issue. So, the levee.org in true form, we like to mobilize the community, and we mobilize the community to write to Sanchez. And the last time I checked, Renee Sanchez has received 150 letters. I need to go check, but he received maybe 200. I need to go look. But he's got a lot of letters, all addressed to him ever since we did this call to action. Well, after doing this call to action and after Renee Sanchez got all these letters, I don't know what happened over there in their office, their pretty new office on Canal, but possibly Renee Sanchez asked the op-ed editor, the one who actually sent those nasty comments, to write back to the to some of the commenters. And one of the subscribers, her name was Catherine Freeman. Catherine Freeman doesn't live in New Orleans, actually. She lives in Baton Rouge. But you didn't have to live in New Orleans to be affected by the levee failures. Okay, you might have had a business in New Orleans and lived in Baton Rouge, and your business went under. Or you might have had family members in New Orleans. So Catherine Freeman lived in Baton Rouge, but was still very, very much affected by the levee failures. So this op-ed editor wrote a very, very interesting, I'm using the word interesting to be polite, okay, to be diplomatic, wrote an email to Ms. Freeman, and in a nutshell, I'm going to paraphrase, but she said to Ms. Freeman, "Oh, we all know here in our news bureau at the Advocate, we know what happened, and everyone knows what happened. So we don't feel we need to repeat it in our news stories. We know." Oh, and she took it a step further. This is the part, again, I never thought I'd see this. Actually took offense that some flood survivors are trying to educate the news bureau because they're acting like they don't know what's going on, and took offense and said something along the lines of, we work hard to serve our subscribers, and we don't appreciate, being educated by our subscribers. I'm phrasing. Anybody that wants to see the actual letter can easily do that, and we'll put that in the show notes. But Sandy, I guess the other Sandy Parker, had some very on point comment about the op-ed editor's remarks, to the subscriber. And so, Sandy, I'd like to go ahead and turn the mic over to you, please.
Okay, well, yeah, I read that letter and I just thought, well, that's just silly. The purpose of the newspaper is to educate the public. I mean, that is the purpose of the newspaper. So, to be like, oh, I'm taking umbrage that you are insinuating that our reporters don't know what happened during Katrina. No, we're saying that the reporters are not delivering the right information to the readers. And it's now, I mean, I have friends whose children were born around that time and are now of legal age. And I've spent time this weekend with some house guests, one of whom is 21 years old. And, you know, we were looking at photo albums and she's like, oh, look, oh, this, and we're like, look, it's the Twin Towers. And, oh, do you guys remember 9/11? I mean, history, those of us who were there, who remember the news reports that we saw, we're here to bear witness for everybody else. The more time goes by, the more I appreciate, I used to think there would always be old people in the world. And then at some point recently at a funeral, I realized that yes, there will always be old people, but they'll be my contemporaries. So I won't be like looking up to these people who have this historical knowledge that preceded me. They're going to be gone and it's just going to be us. And so my father turns 90 next week. He knows so much. And someday he'll be gone and I won't be able to ask him all the questions, but I may seem like I'm deviating from the subject, but the thing is, also as a filmmaker, data rot is real. If you get rid of your hard copy of something and you save a file and the file gets corrupted, you can't access the information anymore. And now we've also got a federal government where it seems that documentation data is possibly being erased or at least removed from websites. I think it's the time for all news publications to step it up, not step it back.
Well said.
Somebody has to carry the torch and provide information for people who weren't there, who don't remember, who don't know.
Well said, Sandy. When I saw your comments about the op-ed editor, what the op-ed editor actually said to a subscriber, I think I'm still in shock. But I love the way you just described it so succinctly. Because of us out here, the people, we need to be reminded every day. We should be talking about this 100 years from now.
That's right.
So,
And always in the same way, always with the same wording, always with the same intent, and with the understanding that we have, that we fought, that you, Sandy, that I like to think myself, and I think the community fought so hard to achieve, which was the understanding that, as the federal government, as the Army Corps of Engineers itself, tried to put the blame on us. They tried to blame us for the levees failing, when we know through your hard work, through the community's hard work, through a lot of good reporting at the time, that it was the fault of the Army Corps of Engineers. It was bad design. It was horrible design that was just destined to fail. It was just a matter of time.
It was just a matter of time. It happened to be Katrina, but it might have been the next thunderstorm.
It could have been. And then, also in this letter to the editor from Renee Sanchez, the editor that we're talking about sending all the letters to, he wrote this sentence. I quote, "Any newsroom claiming to work in the public interest also needs another bedrock value, humility." That's him. Those are his words. A willingness to listen to all sides.
Well, Rudy, let me ask you something. Have you heard from Renee?
Transparency.
I haven't.
No, I didn't expect to. Of course, if I read my letter, I think you'd be. My letter was a little bit more stark, and I was a little bit more right in his face. So I kind of enjoyed my letter myself too.
But he didn't respond to you. I bet he didn't respond to you.
No, not at all. I haven't heard a word. And
Oh,
so,
who else wrote a letter, a
yeah,
personal letter,
yeah.
on his own? Uh,
Hmm.
John Barry, one of the first commissioners on in the levy board reform, one of the first commissioners.
Absolutely.
When he saw this, he said, Sandy, I got this. I'm going to send my own letter. And he did. He sent me a copy of it. John Barry is a fabulous writer. And of course, it was beautiful work of prose. To my knowledge, Renee Sanchez has not responded to any of these
Anyone,
100 people who has asked
anyone.
them to issue a style guide, just like the Associated Press has done years ago.
Yes,
The Associated Press, for those of you listeners who aren't aware, the Associated Press is an international news source, much, much bigger than the Advocate. Now, maybe they're not based in New Orleans, but they're huge. And they issued a style guide to all of its reporters worldwide. Whenever you talk about the flooding in New Orleans, you need to include levee failure. And then depending on what you're
that's it.
writing about, even get more into it, like why the levees failed and what the problem
Absolutely.
was. The Associated Press did this years ago. The Advocate, it's time for you to do the same.
Journalists go by and large, they go by a style guide that's called the Associated Press Style Book. And it's a dictionary, if you will, updated every year by Associated Press that news outlets use for form and for style. And so you can be consistent from one newspaper to the next. And that's basically what we're talking about here. We're talking about being uniform in our explanation and our commitment to the public. And again, this is Rene Sanchez wrote this when he was hired, that a newspaper must show, and this is quote, a willingness to listen to all sides, transparency with readers about our mistakes. He said that. These are his words.
And now
And
it's crickets.
Well, isn't it also
crickets.
interesting that all of this with the these letters back and forth with the Advocate preceded the Associated Press being barred from President Trump's press briefings. But the Associated Press has always kind of been the gold standard. It's strange that the Advocate doesn't want to set its own bar that high.
It is strange. It boggles my mind. I don't understand, why is the Advocate clinging to the original narrative right after the levees broke, when people hadn't yet been found in their attics. The business community had a plan. They called it levee board reform. This is just 7 weeks after Katrina. The city wasn't dewatered, but they were blaming the levee boards. It was the levee board. They weren't paying attention to flood protection. And of course, the Army Corps of Engineers got a total free pass. 7 weeks after the flooding. Well, it was a time of chaos. We were confused. I mean, I'm not confused. We were overwhelmed. People woke up every day and I worried about three things. How am I going to make a living? Where am I going to work? Where am I going to live? And how are my kids going to go to school if you have kids? So we were told, oh, it was the levee boards, and who had the time and the effort and the resources to do the research? So that levee board reform got passed. Okay. At the time, I called it a distraction from the real culprit, which is the Army Corps of Engineers. But I didn't really have a problem with the levee board reform. As far as I was concerned, it was okay. I mean, it none of the reforms are harmful in any way and may even be good. Okay, but they're certainly not harmful. But my big problem with it is it distracted the American people and Congress and the president and us locally from the true culprit, which is the Army Corps of Engineers who misdesigned those levees. In the Army Corps of Engineers' own report, they state clearly the levee did not perform as designed. They were wrongly built, wrongly designed, and wrongly built. Okay, moving right along. So there's a newspaper article just yesterday there where Governor Landry, Jeff Landry, along with somebody who's representing him, his name's Guidry. What's his first name?
Yes. What is his name? His name's Shane.
Shane Guidry, yes. And they want to come in and they're claiming that levee board reform is full of scammers. Well, and, as I mentioned earlier, the levee board reform is not doing any harm. And if you ask me, I would rather have a blue ribbon committee, nominating committee, select our levee board members than the governor. I don't care which governor it is. I'd rather have a blue ribbon committee of experts do this. But our governor wants to come in and just reform the nominating committee, or probably even do away with it altogether. And the only way to do that is to pass a law. And he's going to have a lot of trouble getting the state of Louisiana to change the law on that. But the bottom line is, I think the governor is going to find out that it's going to be a lot harder than he thinks to change to make any changes, because the Army Corps of Engineers is in charge of our levees. Nobody can tell the Corps what to do. And that's one of the things that all the levee commissioners found out after the levee board reform. You can't tell the Corps what to do. They're going to build whatever it is they want. But again, the reforms were not a bad thing. So any other commentary on that newspaper article yesterday?
Well, we'll never really know well, we won't know until we know, which is kind of the mantra for what's happening in America right now.
Mhm.
We're not going to know until we know what the Army Corps of Engineers is going to stand up to or what they're not going to stand up to. We don't know what any federal agency is going to stand up to or not stand up to right now. It's impossible to know. We have no idea what threats they'll knuckle under to. We have no idea what kind of coercion they'll face. And so, we're in a very, very susceptible time right now, to say the least. And that harkens back to what we're talking about with the newspaper, why it's so important for them to do what they need to do. And for these levee boards, the levee boards that we have right now, they're independent, and they're made up of people who know what they're talking about and are making recommendations. The recommendations that they're making are ones that are benefiting the community, that are putting faith in faith in people to be here. It was those reforms of the levee boards that help people want to invest and in the real estate market. I'm sure Sandy can talk to that. It was all of the faith that we started to have in a system that really helped us all rebound. And it took a long time to rebound, but that was a part of it.
But the levee board, but Rudy, though,
Cheers.
the levee board reform, as I said, it caused no harm.
No, right.
But it was not, there was really, the pre-Katrina levee boards did nothing wrong.
Right.
According to the Army
That's just
Corps,
it. Right.
they did nothing wrong.
Right. But they did try to blame them for everything. Correct. They tried to put the blame at the hands of those levee boards, that they didn't inspect them, that they did. And these were jobs of our Corps of Engineers.
So who tried to blame the levee board?
The Army Corps, the federal government,
yeah.
and George Bush and everyone.
And that the business community,
Yes.
all those business community people who had
Yes.
their minds made up, it was the levee board, even though there's
Right.
no evidence to back that up. Absolutely no evidence, but they just kept saying it over and over again, and people
Right.
bought it hook, line, and sinker. So here we
And
are with the
and it's my
levee board. Mhm.
yes, and it's my understanding that it's the local levee board that that Mr. Guidry wants to replace the leader of that levee board with, like, the police chief of the
Yeah,
levees, who
yeah.
has no experience whatsoever in levees. That's not what he does. And the
That's
person who's running it now is an engineer. And you have to remember who Mr. Guidry is. Mr. Guidry is someone who has worked his way up from a towboat
Yeah.
operator to a guy who runs all kinds of vessels for the oil and gas industry and then the deep water projects. And so that should tell you a lot about where our governor is headed and what his intent is. That
No
it's
doubt.
not what's good for the community. It's more what's good for the industry and what's going to benefit him in the long run through donation.
Undoubtedly, it's about money.
Always.
Army, the levy authority controls about $70 million a year. Anybody in this city who turns their tax bill over, you see the number one is the public schools, and then another big one in there is the levy authority. So we pay for the maintenance and operation of our levees. So this is about that $70 million a year. And obviously the governor wants a piece of that $70 million of controlling that. So what he's doing is he's claiming that the nominating committee, that's the guys who choose who's going to serve, okay?
That's what I understand.
Claiming there's scammers on the nominating committee. And so who did they go to for comment on this? The scammers. I mean, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But they interviewed PAR Louisiana and the Committee for Better New Orleans. Those two, among others, those two organizations are required by law to have one of their members on the nominating committee. So of course they're going to say rosy things about how important the levy authority is and the nominating committee is. Of course they're going to say that by law. No, it's one of their people that either designate or one of their own members. Though in my mind, they should have either recused themselves from comment or in transparency said, oh, by the way, I'm commenting on this, but you should know that one of my members is on that nominating committee. You see what I'm saying? So in my
Yeah,
mind,
transparency.
and I asked the reporter in transparency. So I asked the reporter asked me, can you think of anyone I can interview for commentary on this? He did interview me. He didn't include my quotes. I think he didn't like them because I just talked about how the levy board reform was a distraction. And I don't think he wanted to hear that. So
Right.
I said, you're not going to find anybody who can comment on this. This is pretty complex stuff. I did give him the name of one person, Stephen Estopanol, who was an 8-year commissioner on the levee authority post Katrina. And so the reporter, Alex Lubin, did call Stephen Estopanol, and according to Lubin, it was depressing talking to Lubin because according to Estopanol, you can't tell the Corps what to do, which is what I've been
Right.
saying for 20 years. Nobody tells the Army Corps what to do. And the governor is going to find that out. No one tells the Corps what to do. What the levee board does is spends that $70 million a year maintaining our $16 billion flood protection system, which is extremely expensive to maintain.
Right.
I don't think that they have enough money. I think they also have to supplement it with the money that they make off the airport and the marina.
Right. And
That's
cookie
another
sales.
story for another.
Cookie
That was
sales.
called that was called corruption 20 years ago. But that's actually, it made money and it's
Right.
paid for our levies with. But anyway, I've prattled on enough.
And now here's the other thing too. It's just that this is not just a local issue. This is everywhere. This is what's going on in places all over. If there's a levee by you, if there's a local newspaper that's maybe just one newspaper in your town, it's everywhere. This is what's happening. And even going back to the newspaper thing, I have a deep fear of what's happening here is what's happening all over the world almost, but certainly over the country with newspapers, is that. And this Rene Sanchez, his actions make me fear this, is that he may be more interested in readership and adding readers than he is in the news. And it used to be that the news brought readers, but now the new thinking is that features and food writing and better sports coverage is what readers want. And time will tell. The attention span of a normal person is really decreased over my lifespan, that's for sure. And so we'll see. But I have a feeling that's what's happened. I feel that he may have been brought on to help dilute the paper as opposed to pump it up. And I think this is a great example. In my mind, this is what sparked that thought, is that, unfortunately, that might be what's happening here.
I think that's a very valid comment. The only thing I'm going to add is the last line of this article that appeared yesterday. That was a discussion of Landry trying to reform the nominating committee. The final line in the article was, "Well, the Flood Protection Authority is doing a great job." Well, how do you know? How do you measure the Flood Protection Authority's work? There is no way to know if they're doing a good job or not. And I've mentioned this before. There's only one measure, and that is the Army Corps of Engineers gives a grade to the levee authorities every year for their maintenance and operations. And if you don't get a good grade, we could lose our certification of our levees and no one can get insurance. Okay, there's one measure and one measure only. Prior to Katrina, every single year, the Army Corps of Engineers gave the Flood Authority a grade of excellent. And I've seen the plaques with my own eyes. After Hurricane Katrina and the levee board reform, every single year, almost every year, the Army Corps of Engineers has given the grade to the Flood Authority for the maintenance, a grade of ready, minimally acceptable. Minimally acceptable. And then there's acceptable, and then there's excellent. Okay, so the one measure that there is of the Flood Authority is in the tank. Now, that took maybe a conversation for another time.
Well, maybe they're not used to a grade that high and they're just so proud.
So it's just interesting. How can you go around saying the Flood Authority is doing a great job when it's impossible to measure their work. It's
I
impossible.
think, and maybe Sandy would agree. I think that's because that's what politics is now. That's what governance is now. It's not actually doing it. It's actually just saying you've done it.
Yeah, I agreed. I just had to get that in. So I've talked way too much today. Sandy,
Me.
we invited you onto the show because of your comments were just so spot on and appropriate and beautifully correct. Describing, what we all saw was reprehensible treatment of an editor at the Advocate of a subscriber who's also a flood survivor. And thank you so much for that. Do you have any do you have any advice for the Advocate, Sandy?
Uh, just to remember, like in the olden days, just the facts, ma'am. You know, um,
Nicely played.
Beautiful.
was it who, what, where, when, how? It's reporting. And there's too much magical thinking in the world right now. And I don't know if you guys remember, but after Katrina, there were some people who said, perhaps this flood was God's punishment for people partying too much in New Orleans, those sinners. No, we have the facts that there was a man-made catastrophe,
Yeah.
the levee failure, where everyone was counting on this thing to work and it had not been properly executed. That's facts.
Just the facts, Jack. I love it. That's fabulous advice. I want to you reminded me of something. There's Alex Lubin who wrote this article yesterday. And he supposedly he's one of several people, more than one person is taking over the job for Mark Schlefstein, who was the prior environmental writer who recently retired. Several people are trying to fill his shoes. Well, he's one of them. And I just remembered something he said about Stephen Estopanol's commentary on a story. He thought Stephen Estopanol's comments were quote unquote frustrating. And I thought, well, is it the job of a reporter to decide if to talk about call something frustrating? No, his
Probably
job
not.
is the truth and the
Yeah.
facts. Rudy?
Well, no, what you're supposed to do is write stories in a way that allow the readers to draw their own conclusions, and not try and make those conclusions for them. That's editorializing. That's commentary. So there's a very big difference, and I could probably understand why Sanchez didn't write back to me, because here's one of the things I wrote to him is that now you want to revert back to your pre-journalistic days before the new house has actually sparked the TP's only glory days. Get on the stick and do the clear journalistic thing instead of being a journalistic punk.
Maybe that's why he didn't write back.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I didn't get a Christmas card.
If someone had written to me, I thank you, Rudy. I can't tell you how much you made my day when you described the work of levees.org as journalistic. Even
Oh,
though
absolutely.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. But if anyone wrote to me and critically about anything I'd said and wanted more information, I would say, how much information do you need and when do you want it?
I can attest to that because I did that. When you and I made our acquaintance, I wanted to hear everything you had to say. And when I had my doubts, I went right back to you, and you never hesitated. You got right back to me and said, "This is the information I have. This is the information that's solid. Here's where I got it. Here's where it came from." You proved. I mean, you know, journalism. You're not. You don't go to journalism school and come out and all of a sudden you're a journalist. It's like anything else. It's 10,000 hours. That's always a great. I love that 10,000 hour explanation. If you do something for 10,000 hours, then you can kind of call yourself an expert at it. And you put in the hours. And you, Karen Gadbois, I always bow down to you all because you were citizens who weren't trained as journalists, who didn't have that calling per se, but you took up the mantle and you went and you got information that no journalists had gotten. And you found out things that no journalists had gotten, and you paid attention to things that no journalists had paid attention to, and you did it for all the right reasons. You did it for community, and you all yourself, Karen, helped this community in such myriad ways that it's impossible to say thank you enough because it was, you helped keep insurance rates down. I know it. You helped people understand and not feel guilty like we did something wrong and we didn't do something wrong. And had Katrina been the result of us sinning, my God, this town would have been gone 100, 200 years ago. So, I mean, let's be honest about what the truth is.
Well, thank you. And at the risk of this sounding like a smooch fest
No, cheers.
To a mutual admiration society,
No.
I have to share something with you. I remember like it was yesterday. I was in my little town of New Orleans, uptown, and somebody was walking past me with I could laughing, cackling, laughing, trying to look and see what the laughter is. And someone I don't know was walking down the sidewalk reading a copy of your paper, just laughing and laughing and laughing and just continued laughing all the way to the end, laughing at the corner.
Yeah, I love those stories. I love the stories of when I hear people said they laughed because that was the most depressing time of our lives, and it was a very difficult. It was the hardest time of our existence because we didn't know if we was going to survive, and that's why I did it to try and help some people, help our psyche a little bit.
And it was before we all
those yes.
We're taking a video of it if that happened again today, but it really did happen. I remember that like yesterday. Yep, there we go.
That's our former mayor with the cone of error. So yeah, absolutely.
So well, anyway, I for the 100th time I've talked way too much today.
Same here.
A lot of pent up. There's been pent up inside me for a long time. Here we are, the 20th anniversary of the levee breaches, and still our paper of record is still protecting the Corps for reasons I can't understand. It protected them years ago when I caught the Army Corps of Engineers sitting at their computers and logging on to the Advocate's website where I kept a blog and leaving vicious comments, and we caught them doing it. And
a propaganda campaign against you.
And against levees.org, vicious comments, and we caught them. And what did the Time-Picayune do? Jim Amos made out like levee.org and me were the villain,
right?
And we were the problem. And and when we asked to see, just show us the comments, we'd like to see how there's thousands and thousands of comments. I suspected. It turned up that what their response was to ridicule me and to fire the managing editor of NOLA.com, and that was John Donnelly. He was fired, and then the next day they got rid of all the software and put in new software so that the Army Corps of Engineers could never again be caught, logging onto their computers and disparaging people online. So that was the response of the editors, Jim Amos and his boss was Ashton Phelps, and this year was 2008.
Right. The editors that were good there were one or two, and the reporters they brought on were generally pretty good. But when you're a reporter, you're often at the disposal of an editor, and what you cover, what you can't cover. It's an interesting relationship, and
I'm talking
it
about the
dictates what a.
editor.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the senior editors.
Top,
I know you're talking
senior
about
editor.
senior editors, right? Absolutely,
And
and
even
you're
though
completely right. And
I,
I know all those people, and you're absolutely correct.
I
And
really did
that's
a
why I was so
lot.
thankful when you when you wanted to talk about this topic, because I'll talk about journalism all day. It's near and dear to my heart. I did what I did with the levee, and I came down here, and I was beholden to no one. I had moved here permanently a year before. I was beholden to no one. It felt like it was on my shoulders to go and just tell the truth and just be bare but honest about what was happening. And I chose the medium of satire to do it. But I will talk about journalism, and I eat, breathe it. It's my life. I've been in journalism since I was in seventh grade. So
Well, I'm really glad you brought up this point because when I say the advocate or the Time Picayune, I don't
mhm.
mean every reporter and every
Mhm.
editor and every staffer and every
Right,
data entry.
right.
I mean the top. I mean,
Understood.
and at that time when I was villainized for trying to get to the truth by Jim Amos, it's between him and me, and not I wasn't going after anybody else. And now it's Renee Sanchez. Now it's me,
Yeah.
and Renee Sanchez, who
And that's why I feel like,
I wouldn't recognize him, but I'm sure he knows who I am by now.
right, right. And that's why I feel like, I feel like the paper is, and I can't say that this is the first time I thought it, but it sure feels like the paper is reverting instead of progressing.
Well, not on our watch.
We're here.
That's why we're here. So I think I've used up everything I wanted to say today. This is a
Cheers.
much longer episode than usual for us. I kind of knew this was going to happen, but we had so much material, and I'm glad we got this knocked out. Sandy, is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners before you sign off?
Yeah. I'm just so pleased and flattered that you invited me to be a part of this. It was totally unexpected and I appreciate it. I love that you mentioned Karen Gadbois. She interviewed me for a written article many years ago about a property that one of my clients had renovated. So it was nice to hear her
Wonderful.
name.
She's a hero.
Sandy, you were a Levee.org supporter from the very, very beginning, way beginning.
Yeah. I moved here. I was inspired to move here because of Katrina. Katrina, the storm actually hit, was a direct hit to where my mom and dad live in Mississippi.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't a direct hit on New Orleans. My parents had a lot of work to do and they were already up in age and they had 11 trees down on their property and
Yes.
a lot of damage.
Cheers. Understood.
Understood. We are very, very, very much understood. Well,
One more thing, Sandy. You
absolutely.
know, just real quick, we're taking, I think, deserved shots at the Times Picayune, but you have to remember, just like everywhere these days, if you're looking for alternatives, if you're looking for a different voice, there's right now there's a really good website out there called the LA Illuminator. I think the Louisiana Illuminator is doing great work, and Greg LaRose, the editor over there, I think they're doing very good work. And so if you see a story in the time in the Advocate Picayune, I still call it the Picayune, but if you see a story in the Advocate, take a look at the LA Illuminator and see how they compare, and that'll help.
And let's not forget the New Orleans lens. The
Absolutely,
New Orleans lens. I mean, way too often, it's disturbing to me how few people know about the lens.
absolutely. Still, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were making a great name, and I think they just had some growing issues. But you're absolutely right. I wish that they got a lot more attention because they deserve it. So, and there's Verite, and there's several different outlets out there now that are trying to do some good work. And so, the best way you can inform yourself is to take a look. It doesn't take much time.
So I guess you would agree with me, Rudy and Sandy, that probably our final comment is get your news from various sources. Don't get it all
Cheers, cheers,
at a
or
minimum.
just listen, or just listen to us.
On that note, how about we sign off, okay?
Cheers.
All right. Thank you, Rudy, for being with me. Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, the listeners, for coming back to listen to yet another episode of The Slingshot from levees.org. See you next time. Okay, Rudy and Sandy, stay with me.